Hello, and thank you for coming to cook veggie burgers with me today. These particular ones that we're going to be making are called my barbecue patties. Now, there are about a bazillion different kinds of veggie burgers that we can make with all different types of combinations of foods. Tonight, I've had to choose one little selection of each of those ingredients for you to make. Now, this variety called the barbecue patties, there will still be a lot of different opportunities for substitution within that. So I'm going to try and give that to you as we go along tonight. I'd also love to hear from you how many of you are already making veggie patties and whether or not it's a regular weekly thing for your family or whether it's something that you feel is too much work. I'd like to simplify it for you because when set up properly with a few little organization things included in there, it can be a really quick and easy meal to pop out within 10-15 minutes on a Friday night. So, veggie burgers. I want to get into that with you. The principle of veggie burgers in this sense doesn't actually include a lot of vegetables per se, but it's going to be all plant-based foods as opposed to meat is the intention here. So with the amount of moisture that's going to be coming out of things like the beans and the cooked rice, we actually need to include a lot of other dry meals so that we can absorb that and make the patties form and hold. So the magic and the key to making a good veggie patty is basically just getting that consistency right so that they hold nicely and firm in order to be cooked, and then also so that they don't behave too or feel too dry in the mouth when you bite into them. So that's pretty much the balance that we're trying to strike with any veggie burger. Let's see what we can do that with tonight, and I'm going to show you how you can adjust it either way to make sure that whatever veggie burger combinations you end up going with, you can make work based on the textures and consistencies there. So if you haven't already got the grains pre-cooked, so we could use rice, we can use quinoa, we can use buckwheat. If you haven't already got them happening, let's get them on straight away. And for future tips, one thing that you can do to save a lot of time is make sure that anytime that you're making, for example, rice to go with a meal anyways, make a bit extra and squirrel some away in the freezer so that the exercise for veggie patties or veggie burgers another day is that much easier. It'll defrost in pretty much no time. You can pull it out of the freezer, mix it in with the food processor, and it basically doesn't take you any more time to have to thaw them out initially. So having some squirreled away in the freezer is great for this. It's great for a whole bunch of other recipes that we're going to be doing as well. So that's a good habit to get into. Now, I've already got the rice cooked. One little thing I'm going to say, however, is rice after it has been chilled is going to be a lot less moist than freshly cooked. And that would be ideal in a veggie burger sense. Okay, so if at all possible, we're using cold rice as opposed to freshly cooked, soft and kind of potentially mushy rice. The reason why that is because if we use freshly cooked rice, perfectly fine, but there'll be a tendency to have to add a lot more drying ingredients just to get the patty to hold. And then by the time you cook it and eat it, it might feel a bit dry in the mouth. Whereas, contrary to maybe, I guess, our initial instinct or thought, if we start off with a cold rice or a less moist rice, then we're not going to have to add as many drying ingredients to the patty. They'll hold, and when you cook them, that moisture will come out of the rice naturally. Okay, so that's a little trick when it comes to veggie burgers. Okay, so we've got the rice already cooked. If you haven't got that out and ready, like I said, let's get that on the cook now, and then you can pause as needed to catch up to us there. And as far as the other ingredients that we use to dry the veggie patties out, I've suggested cashews, sunflower seeds, flax meal, and then you can use a combination of polenta or almond meal, up to your choice. But if there's other meals that you'd like to use, definitely you can substitute in there. So if you're eating oatmeal, oatmeal works beautifully in a veggie patty. Keep in mind though, it's not strictly gluten-free. And then other things, you could use a bit of pepita meal. If there's other nuts, almond meal is suggested. If there's other meals that you'd like to use, you can play around and I guess combine as you like. Even quinoa flakes you could get away with, but they have a tendency to be a little bit bitter. Okay, so we'll stick to the usuals, the regulars, if you will, the cashews, the sunflower seeds. And by all means, if you can't do nuts, for example, then you can substitute with extra sunflower seeds, flax meal, and polenta. Polenta is one of those magic ingredients that we really kind of benefit from in a veggie burger. So If at all possible, get yourself an organic polenta, then we know that it's not genetically modified or any of those other dodginesses, and stick to the organic polenta wherever possible. Let's get stuck into it. You're going to need a food processor. Does not have to be whiz bang wow, but it will have to be a little bit powerful just to do all the mixing for you. That being said, if you just need to do this by hand, that's perfectly fine. You'll need to use a bit of elbow grease with a potato masher to get everything to kind of start to stick and adhere to each other though. So that's perfectly fine. We can employ the troops if you have troops in the house and get them onto the task as well. All right, so into the food processor, we're going to be putting all the ingredients up to the rice and the beans so that we can make that mixture nice and cohesive and even first. Then we'll add in the rice and the beans, which tend to bog the machine down a bit at the end. So let's get out your cashews, sunflower seeds, flax meal, and polenta and bring them on over. Okay. Flax meal, polenta, and if you haven't already got out your measuring spoons and measuring cups, you can do that now as well. And then the few other little bits and pieces that we'll need will be, I'll grab those as we go. So let's start off with the things that need to be milled. If you haven't already got your flax meal milled, we'll need to make sure that we do that first. Now, some machines are not strong enough, food processors that is, are not strong enough to mill the flax meal straight up. So if you have a machine that you might need to do it separately in a little coffee grinder or in a bullet blender to get your flax meal. So we're gonna need a half a cup of the flax meal. Let's put that in because that's already ground and ready to go. All right, half a cup of polenta. Now polenta is corn. I do get asked this a lot. Polenta is corn, and it does come from the maize variety of corn, not the sweet corn that we eat off the cob. So they are different corns, and the important thing with corn nowadays is just to make sure that we get a non-genetically modified version of it, and then you should be all good. So organic is the way to go in that sense when it comes to corn. Now we're going to use 1 cup of cashews. I've got a half cup measure here, so 2 of them. Doesn't need to be exact. And same goes with the sunflower seeds. If you think about the amount of nutrition that we are packing into these veggie patties, I think it's exciting. I don't know about you, but it's not often that we could get this many seeds like sunflower seeds or even pepitas if you're going to use flax meal into many kids just on their own straight up. So it's good to have an option where we can hide it all into one batch and you can hide a bunch of other nutritious things in as well. So we've got all of our nuts and seed meals in there. Let's put in the onion at the same time. So if you can get out your onion, might as well bring over the garlic, the egg, and any of the other ingredients that you've got ready to go. And with the onion, nothing special here, large, medium, small, whatever you've got. It adds a little bit of really yummy flavor to it. You could go to the extent of kind of caramelizing the onion if you wanted to have quite a bit of onion flavor to your veggie burger, but that could be for another recipe another day. So for the sake of today, we're just going to put in a raw onion and we're going to let the machine do the work. That's something you'll probably hear me say a lot. So, when it comes to onions, by the way, red, yellow, white, they all have different flavor preferences, profiles. So whatever works for you, it doesn't really matter in this case, in this recipe. All right, so we've got that onion. Just give it a little help. Pop the onion in there. Get that out of the way. And then garlic. Now, garlic, have you ever tasted the difference between raw garlic straight beside a piece of roasted garlic? It is just absolutely night and day. It's completely a different food item, I'd say. So if at all possible, if you've got some roasted garlic on hand, when I say if you've got some roasted garlic on hand, I'm sure some of you might just laugh, but The idea here is just a different habit that we're developing. So this garlic I roasted 2 days ago when I had the oven on anyways. And the beauty about garlic coming in its, I guess, whole bulb form, I just put the whole bulb straight into the oven, and then all you have to do is chop away the bottom, and we get nature's natural dispenser of garlic. So this does get a little bit messy, but the idea is I didn't have to spend nearly half an hour taking the skins of the garlic off, and instead we can just basically squish the roasted garlic out. So as far as having this on hand, it's like I said, it's just a different habit. It's just something you think about. The next time you go to turn the oven on or put some veggies in the oven or whichever, a roast, just see if you've got a whole bulb of garlic that you can pop in as well. And then you've got this delicious, mild flavor of roasted garlic to put into any dip or sauce or veggie patty. So it's something you can have on hand very easily with a slightly different habit maybe to what you're used to. So I'm going to put all of that beautiful roasted garlic in. If you were using raw cloves, I wouldn't do more than probably a clove to a clove and a half. Just, it depends on the strength of the garlic as well. But something like that in raw form would be plenty for these veggie burgers, generally speaking, unless you're a major, major garlic lover. Okay, so we've got all that roasted garlic into the mixer. We're gonna let it do the work for us. So let's put the rest of our ingredients in there at the same time. I like Italian spices personally, but again, we're not making souffle here, so you can customize. If you would prefer to use something like Mexican spices, you can go there too. So let's pile everything in. And when it comes to the Italian spices, generally speaking, what makes up an Italian spice? Usually we need basil, oregano, you can use marjoram, parsley, and thyme. Those are kind of the main Italian spices. So again, nothing too precise. We just want to get a bunch of flavor packed into these veggie patties. I served these the other day to some family friends, and their son, who is 10, I believe, he ended up having 5 veggie patties. So they went over well, which was exciting. Now, cayenne pepper. Personally, I like it hot. That should be about right. So I'll leave that one up to you, but a little bit of spunk goes a long way with a veggie patty. So don't be shy. And keep in mind, this does make a lot of patties. So that's actually probably not quite enough, but that's all right. We'll err on the side of caution. Now, given that, like I said, it should make about 24 patties, we need about 2 teaspoons of salt. You could measure that exactly. I'm gonna eyeball it because I know about what it's gonna look like. So that's gonna be about 1 teaspoon and 2 teaspoons. Okay, so don't be afraid of the salt component. If you're using good quality Celtic or Himalayan salt, the body can actually regulate how much you give it, as opposed to table salt, iodized table salt, or rock salt, which the body can't necessarily regulate because it doesn't come with all the 82 to 84 trace minerals that we get out of the Celtic salts and the Himalayan salts. So yes, this one, it's a much better quality salt. That's a big topic I'll get into another day in more detail. Now, where are we up to? I didn't include any raw parsley. That's all right, I haven't got any at the moment. You don't have to worry about that. I might have put in a little bit of extra Italian spice to make up for it. And then our barbecue sauce we are up to. Now, I know this might not look super appetizing, but again, coming back to efficiency in the kitchen, I took 3 freezer cubes out of my homemade barbecue sauce. So basically just straight from the freezer, I'd made up a batch of barbecue sauce, put it into the freezer, had them in little cube form. Since then it's been a little bit thawed in the meantime, which is why they don't look like perfect cubes. But that's gonna be my 4 tablespoons of barbecue sauce in the homemade form. If you've just got a regular from a bottle, absolutely fine. We'll put 4 tablespoons of that in as well. It's just that extra bit of flavor base that we really need to make up for the fact that by not using meat, we're not getting all of the rich, delicious fats that basically is the reason why most people love the meat. So we're making up for that with healthy versions of flavor as opposed to MSG and a lot of the other dodgy things we won't go near. Now, second last before we give this a good blend, some nutritional yeast. So approximately 2 tablespoons we're going to be using, which is about that much. Could use a little bit more. This gives it a bit of a cheesy flavor as opposed to, well, it's a bit cheesy. It's not a living yeast, so you don't have to worry about it necessarily when it comes to, you know, candida issues in the body or throwing out your gut balance, but it is a non-living yeast. So we use it for its kind of cheesy flavor and a bit of vitamin B benefit as well we get from the nutritional yeast. All right, last we get the egg into the mixture, and then we're going to give that a really good mix before we add into the last 2 ingredients, the rice and the beans. All right. Okay, so a bit of noise here. Depending on what machine you're using, you may need to give it a little bit of assistance. So if it's a regular food processor, just grab a spatula and scrape down the edges, and we might need to do this one more time. And then we'll just make sure that we've got an even mixture. So bear with me one more time. Let's make sure this is mixed. So we're just looking to make sure that the mixture is fairly cohesive and well mixed. Now, a little bit of texture is all right because that actually looks quite nice in a veggie burger. So we just want to make sure that that's fairly well mixed before we add in the 2 items that are going to really kind of push the machine to its limits, because we want to make sure that it's thick enough to make patties from. So at this point, I'll give you the option. You can, again, push your machine and see what it's worth, or you can mix the rest by hand. So I'm going to do a little combination of both. I'm going to put it into the machine, give it a mix, but then pretty soon after I'll probably take it out into a bowl and do the rest by hand. Okay, so kidney beans. I've got some organic red kidney beans. You could use black beans or cannellini beans, whatever's easier for you. And we're going to give them a little rinse. Make sure you don't lose any from the tin. There we go. And let's drain all the moisture really well from this because we want these veggie burgers to be the right texture. Okay, so straight in. And then about 1.5 cups of rice. Again, not super rocket science. It's going to be a little bit more. Push these a bit further. The recipe. There's about our 1.5 cups. Let's see what this machine's got. Okay, we're just going to scrape down the edges, go one more time. So we're nearly there, but we see how we still have full rice grains and full kidney beans. We do want to be able to mash them up a bit. So it's perfectly normal for a machine not to be able to do that all on its own. We just want to do as much of it as we can with the machine and as little of it by hand as possible. So I'm going to give that one more little go. All right, now this is where you get to use your new skills that you're developing And we're going to test the consistency, the texture, so that you know exactly how to correct in future, because no matter how many times I make veggie patties, the texture is going to be different every time. It depends on how moist the rice was, how the beans were, I guess the humidity, I have no idea, but it's different every time. So I'm just bringing that up because I want to show you what the perfect stickiness is to make a great veggie burger. We are very close here, actually. This is probably going to be bang on. You want to have to use a bit of muscle action to get this out. Okay, so the ultimate test is going to be when we start to form a patty. But notice how that's holding pretty well. That's kind of what we're looking for in our texture. So again, the balance that we're trying to strike with a veggie burger is not too wet that it's really messy to form the patties, but not too dry that by the time we cook it, it's going to be actually not enjoyable to eat. Okay, so we're pretty close here. If this was too moist, then we could add a little bit more meal. So you can add slowly until you get it adjusted correctly. You could add some more nuts, you could add some more flax meal, some more polenta, whatever you feel is going to dry it out the best. And if it was too dry, we can add another egg or a little bit more barbecue sauce for a bit of extra flavor. It doesn't take a lot of extra liquid to make it workable. Actually, as a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever had to add more liquid. It's always a matter of adding more drying ingredients to make it workable. So I'm going to just make some space here for I'm going to grab a bowl and let's mix up these patties. You'll also need a bowl to put some polenta in so that we can form the patties and dunk them into that as well. So I'd probably recommend a little shallow bowl, something like that. And at this stage, we can also start preheating whatever you're going to be cooking the veggie burgers on. So if it's a frying pan, if it's the oven, even if it's the barbecue, I'd be turning that on now and getting that ready to go. So a bit of polenta into the small bowl. And we may not even need to actually transfer it into the big bowl. We might just work with it as is there. Let's save ourselves a dish. Okay, so just preheating the frying pan. Given that I'm using these beautiful Australian-made Solid Technics pans, they need to be fully preheated first. They're absolutely naturally non-stick if we learn how to use them correctly. And the same principle goes if you're using a stainless steel pan. So that's something that we will cover in future sessions as well, but just know that in order to make these really good quality, healthy pans non-stick, there's a little bit of a process first. And then every time you do that, you'll be so pleased about the pans. I just absolutely love them. Okay, now we're going to get messy, so make sure that you're all set up. My favorite way to do this is to get a plate out that we can put all of the patties onto for when we before we put them into the pan. Make ourselves a bit of space. All right, here we go. Let's get messy. Now, I like to err on the side of smaller rather than too big and just form up a little patty like that. Gonna dab it into the polenta so that we don't have the sticky surfaces, and it's literally that easy. Okay, so we'll form up a bunch of patties here and then I'll show you how we can bake them quite easily. Because they're quite moist on the inside, we actually want to make sure that they cook for longer and at a lower temperature so that we fully heat them through the middle. It's not like meat that cooks really quickly all the way through. Okay, so we just need to make sure that we cook them on a slightly lower temperature and then make sure they heat all the way through, which is another reason why I like to form them in a slightly flatter pancake shape rather than big round balls, basically, of a patty. So that's basically how we do it. But that being said, you can have a little bit of fun with this, because the other thing I like to do is actually just make, well, normally it'd be half this size. So I like to put a few of these in the freezer. Sometimes I call them neat balls with an N. I think they're pretty neat, you might not, but there's my little neat ball. And if we can even get them smaller still, they're absolutely perfect for dropping into Italian meatball soup, which is going to be another recipe coming up soon as well. So these are really great to have a couple little extras of at all times in the freezer, and then you can have these quick little neat balls for any recipe that you don't want to put them with. And just the exact same process. The other thing you can do, I don't know about you, but I grew up with these amazing appetizer Swedish meatballs that Mum used to make. And I begged for them every single time I heard there was a party happening. They were a lot of work, so she didn't do them as much. You can imagine rolling out these mini appetizer meatballs, sitting there with 200 meatballs. Anyways, employ the troops. Again, get the kids to come along. This is something they can do to enjoy and play along with you. And then these can be little appetizer meatballs with a yummy, delicious, flavorful, probably sugary sauce, such as well, the traditional Swedish sauce is based on grape jam or grape jelly. So that would be kind of a sticky sweet sauce. So you can do it that way instead. All right, so that's the process. We continue that one. Yes, your fingers are going to get messy. Absolutely okay. That's what spatulas are for. There we go. Don't want to waste any of those yummy bits. And then we're going to get some cooking, so I can show you that process. So ideally, make all these up at once. Get them into the fridge. They're even better if you have a chance to get them into the fridge overnight. And then they'll even hold up beautifully on a grill plate in the barbecue. You can bring them to parties. You can have dinner parties with them. Cook them at home. We honestly have found so many uses for these veggie patties. They're basically just a bunch of nutritious, delicious flavor that can go with nearly anything. You can have them on a salad. You can have them with a pasta dish. Very versatile little bits of nutrition. Okay, so my pan should be nice and heated by now. So let's go back and get these cooking, and I'll show you what I mean. So in preparing the pan, we do want it to be nice and hot. This is very hot, as you can see. And I'm not going to turn the fan on because it's going to create a bit too much noise. But once the pan is that hot, you can test it by putting a little droplet of water in. And if it dances across the surface, your pan's ready. There we go. See it dancing? So that's ready. So we let the water evaporate. And then we put a little bit of a healthy fat in. So when I say healthy, I mean a fat that can handle high heat. That's particularly hot. And then from this point, we can actually turn the heat down. And we can actually slightly cool the pan a bit now. But because we started off at high heat, and again, that was very high, so I apologize there, but we start off at high heat, then this actually forms itself a non-stick surface on the pan. So that's exactly how we start out with our pans. Then we can reduce it. I've gotten them right down to 4 or so there. And then the trick with the veggie burgers is to cook them through, like I said. So we want to make sure that we are at lower heat, and ideally we kind of almost want to steam fry them. So ideally, if you've got a lid to go over, that would be the ultimate, because then you can make sure that they cook all the way through before burning on the outside. Okay, so this is what it looks like when we get it into the pan. And again, the trick here is going to be a bit of a lower heat with the lid on. So because my pan is still so very hot, we're getting a little bit of burning kind of straight away. So that's just a sign that the pan is just a little bit too hot at the moment. So we're going to keep tossing them until the pan cools down a little bit. Okay, and then we'll make sure we put the lid on. And a little trick here, in any time you're using a frying pan that you don't necessarily want to fry in, is we're going to put a little bit of liquid into the lid and then pop that on, and it's almost like a steam cooking. So a little bit of liquid into the lid. When I say a little bit, it's probably about a teaspoon. I just carry it in the lid, and then knowing it's going to create a bit of steam, we do it away from our face. But that's actually going to cook through a lot faster than simply frying it. So, and that steam is actually what we want to create that heat all the way around the food as opposed to just cooking on the bottom surface, which is what most frying pans do. So again, we still have the pan quite hot, but this is, yeah, it doesn't have to be super complicated. They're just veggie burgers. You'll adjust it as you go. Keep the pan on medium to low, and then we've got that veggie burger happening. Ideally, they would need about 3-4 minutes on either side. So if you can adjust the pan heat to make sure that that works without, like I said, burning either side. And then I'd like to talk to you about how we then plate it up. So unlike most people that would have their burger with a bun, I like to have it with everything else in greater quantities instead of the bun. Now, sometimes I will go to the extent of making my own gluten-free buns, but for the most part, I want to focus on things like freshly sliced, thinly sliced cucumber, fresh onion, some avocado, tomatoes. Definitely want to get some living food into there. So this is a sauerkraut, homemade sauerkraut that I love on every veggie burger. Some delicious lettuce. And then something a little bit special, I've sauteed up some mushrooms and onions, which is also delicious on any veggie burger platter. So we're going to get those plated up, ready to have our veggie burger on top. And then I've also got some homemade hot sauce, which, like I said, I like the heat on it, so I can't go past that. You could also do a homemade tomato sauce or barbecue sauce. And then some Dijon mustard, which is one of my personal absolute faves. All right, so a nice big plate. Let's plate up on that one. So instead of a bun, you could also do more formal forms of wrapping, such as a cabbage leaf. And if you really want the cabbage leaf to fold nicely, I would just stick it in that frying pan with the lid on and that little bit of liquid like we did. So you can steam cook it for no more than a minute, just to soften up the cabbage leaf so that you can wrap it like a proper wrapper. And otherwise, you could use things such as a nori seaweed paper to wrap it in. You could even use rice paper wraps to wrap your burger in. It might look untraditional, but that's okay. Otherwise, you build it like this. So I like to arrange my salad on the bottom. Plate it all up decoratively. It's basically like a salad, but we're going to think of it as one big, huge veggie burger by the time we're ready to dig in. Okay, same as our little, forming a little bed for it. Couple cucumbers, couple tomatoes. Let's put on some avocado, a little bit of sauerkraut underneath, and then definitely can't go past the sauteed mushrooms and onions. Love. Let's get some of that red showing. And then a couple dollops of sauce we will put on top of the burger. So let's go see if they're ready to go. There we go. So because we turned the heat down, even though those have been cooking for about 3 or so minutes, we haven't burnt the undersides. That's a good sign that we got the heat right. With the meatballs, if you had the whole pan of meatballs, you just keep moving them around and keeping a different surface touching down on the bottom as you cook them. So from here, let's grab ourselves a couple of these delicious veggie patties and stack them on so that we can eat dinner. There we go. Now that is my kind of burger. Bit of mustard, bit of hot sauce. If you had some homemade mayonnaise, you could put some of that on there. There we go. We'll finish it off with a bit more sauerkraut. My version of a delicious veggie burger. Oh, yum. Can't wait to dig into that. So can I please see photos of how your stack turned out, or your wrapper, or your veggie burger, whatever it looks like. I really want to see your version of your barbecue patties. Thank you so much for cooking with me.